So we're going to be talking about the 2021 MacBook Pro, and before I get to that, I really want to give some bit of background to this video. So I'm a content creator and I create everything I need for this YouTube channel, from thumbnails to video editing, on my desktop PC, which is running on RTX 3080. Well, maybe not everything, because I do use my iPad Pro for scripting purposes and then sometimes use the MacBook Air to fill up all the details and upload the videos. And it just struck me one day when I received a notification to tell me that my Premiere Pro subscription was coming to an end. And then I re-looked at the cost of it, $28 a month for it, which amounts to about $330 a year. That's a lot of money to pay for a video editing platform. And then I started thinking maybe I should leverage Final Cut Pro and pay a $450 one-time fee. I like saying that, one-time fee. And on top of that, I also see it as being easier for me since I've got a strong Apple ecosystem set up with my iPad and my phone. It just makes a lot of sense to move into that direction of a Final Cut Pro on a Mac device. So when Apple launched the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips on the new 2021 MacBook Pros, like almost everybody, I waited for the reviews to come up since there were so many options for specs, and these were new things. We're looking at 64GB unified memory, not just RAM, unified memory. And the two main chips, M1 Pro and M1 Max, exactly what it could do, apart from what Apple is telling us on their website, was something that really mattered. And finally, a month ago, I received my MacBook Pro, and it has been a tremendous joy using it ever since. Obviously, I customized the specs, and hence I had to wait 2 more weeks for it to be delivered. And in this video, I'm going to share with you the specs that I've got and why I chose those specs, as well as touch on a little bit of features here and there, but not diving in too much because, to be honest, tons of unboxing reviews and MacBook Pro reviews out there. So bear with me till the end because I promise to keep this really short and sweet. Now, Apple released a 16-inch and 14-inch MacBook Pro. I've opted for the 14-inch. The reason for my choice is really simple. I needed a video editing tool on a Mac device. I needed portability so I don't have to be glued to my desk. I could basically take my work with me to the coffee table, to the couch, basically wherever I go. I know many creators will feel that bigger is better, especially when it comes to screen size and perhaps even the trackpad. But if I'm going to be working on a MacBook Pro on my desk, even the 16-inch is going to be small. I would have connected the MacBook Pro to an external monitor. And that's the beauty of the 2021 MacBook Pros. They now have a HDMI port, so there's no need for extra adapters in order to connect your MacBook Pro to external monitors. Now, colors-wise, you guys would have seen that I've opted for the space gray instead of the silver. I have the MacBook Air in silver and I really wanted the differentiation. The 14-inch MacBook Pro did turn out to be heavier and thicker than expected. Before the launch, you see all those pictures, renders and so forth. They look sleek, but when I finally got my hands on it, it didn't carry that very sleek MacBook look the way with those very rounded corners. But to be honest, if you compare it to the typical Intel gaming laptops that we can also use as creators, 14-inch MacBook Pro looks sleek enough. So the specs I got for this 14-inch MacBook Pro were the M1 Pro chip with 10-core CPU and 16-core GPU, 1TB of SSD storage, as well as 32GB of unified memory. Now the first question you may have in mind is why the M1 Pro and not the M1 Max chip? So to be very clear, the 14-inch MacBook Pro for me is really meant to do only content creation. I'm not using this for any other purposes. If for social media and entertainment, I would use my iPad Pro for that, for Netflix, for YouTube and so forth. And for gaming, I go back to my desktop PC, which runs on RTX 3080. That's what I built that PC for, and it's very expensive. And therefore, I won't even be gaming on the MacBook Pro. Considering the use case I'm solving for with the MacBook Pro is really just access to Final Cut Pro on a Mac device for video editing. And by no means am I doing a lot of 4K footages and none of the 8K footages at all. I had gone ahead with the M1 Pro chip with 10-core CPU and 16-core GPU. Now, I know that there are a lot of reviews out there saying that even the base specs of the 14-inch MacBook Pro at 8-core CPU and 14-core GPU is sufficient. It is still a level up from the M1 chip that was launched in 2020. And looking at all the performance reviews of the base spec of the 14-inch versus the one I've got, the difference in performance is really not huge. Assuming I had gone ahead with the base specs at 8-core CPU and 14-core GPU and then upgraded it to 1TB of SSD as well as 32GB of unified memory, that would have costed me $3,899, which means that the additional 2 cores of CPU and 2 cores of GPU that I've upgraded for Pro has cost me $450. But since I'm intending to use this MacBook Pro for at least another 4 to 6 years, this $450 was okay for me, in my opinion, to future-proof for that 4 to 6 years. Now, the second question you may have in mind is why upgrade to a 32GB of unified memory, and does it even do anything? Once again, I don't have a 16GB unified memory MacBook Pro to test and compare against the 32GB that I have here. I'll be honest to say that I relied solely on the tests that other reviewers had done, and still I came to a conclusion to upgrade the RAM to 32GB. Most of the tests that I've seen shows that whether you have a 16GB unified memory or 32GB unified memory, you aren't going to see significant difference in performance when it comes to multitasking, when it comes to video editing. But if you're going to be doing a lot of After Effects as well as photo editing, these are applications that are RAM hungry, then additional RAM is going to be really useful for you. What is also evident in a lot of the tests of these reviewers is that when they stress the MacBook Pro, the 16GB unified memory MacBook Pros tend to build up more memory pressure and rely a lot more on the swap memory. Swap memory basically utilizes the SSD in your MacBook Pro, and to me that's not ideal, and if I can minimize that, I'll minimize that. And the reason I say that is because SSDs have a lifespan for the amount of bytes that you can write on it. I'm not saying that the MacBook Pro's SSDs have poor lifespan or short lifespan, but I'm just saying that if I intend to use the MacBook Pro for another 4 to 6 years and I've only got 1TB of SSD, and given that as of current state, we know that you can't change or upgrade your SSD in your MacBook Pro. And as such, this 1TB SSD has become so precious to maintain in good condition to last me that 4 to 6 years. Well, I could have upgraded the SSD from 1TB to 2TB, and that would cost me additional $600. But that's the same amount of money I would have paid to upgrade from a 16GB unified memory to 32GB unified memory. So there's no way that I have already paid $450 more in order to enjoy 2 more cores of CPU and GPU, and pay $600 more to upgrade the SSD from 1TB to 2TB, and also pay $600 more to upgrade the 16GB unified memory to 32GB. So this is very bad mathematics if you just keep adding things that seems in small bits and hoping that the final number is going to be small. If I have to choose between the two, additional storage or additional RAM, I have in fact chosen to upgrade the RAM instead, as that would directly correlate to the performance that I can experience, and simply just continue to rely on external storage drives where possible. I have held back getting a MacBook for content creation previously when the M1 chip was launched, and to be very honest, the M1 MacBook Air was very appealing for its ridiculously thin size and lightweight, and I do like the touch bar on the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro. But the lack of ports was disturbing since I use a lot of external storage for video editing, and connecting to an external monitor is going to make my workflow so much easier. The good news is Apple listened to us, listened to its consumers, and brought back the HDMI and SD card ports as well as the MagSafe charging port to the 2021 MacBook Pros, while still retaining us 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports. The M1 Pro chips also supports 2 external displays, whilst the M1 Max can do up to 4. I really don't have the desk space or need for more than 1. I guess that's the benefit of having ultra-wide monitors which can hold 2 applications side by side as if you had 2 monitors and still appear reasonable. After this 1 month, one of the most amazing things I've realized about a MacBook Pro is the battery life. Per the specs, the 14-inch MacBook Pro is able to play back videos for up to 17 hours and the 16-inch up to 21 hours. This is not possible on a lot of Intel laptops that is running on, say, RTX 3050 and above. And to me, the idea of dangling an adapter because the laptop needs to be constantly charged is really not ideal, and it really kills the purpose of having a laptop, which is portability. And the other obvious difference that I see with this MacBook Pro is that it's really very cool. I've never once heard the fans go off in the 1 month that I've used it. Or perhaps it's because most of the time I had the AirPods Max on and then you have the noise cancellation. But even that, when it's rendering and so forth, I've never heard the fans go off, and it remains cool. I work on the MacBook on my lap, often on the couch. It is not possible with a gaming laptop. I've tried that. It gets really, really warm and it gets really, really hot. Now for content creation, especially video and photo editing, you will love the MacBook Pro's mini LED screen, as it's really an asset to be able to project a billion colors with a 1,000:1 contrast ratio using its 10,000 mini LEDs. I've in fact loved the monitor of the MacBook Pro so much so that even when I'm at my desk, I don't connect it to my ultra-wide monitors because it is inferior in specs as compared to the monitor that's in the MacBook Pro, which is able to give more vivid colors and contrast. Now, 1 month later, I'd say that I'm utterly satisfied with this 14-inch MacBook Pro, 10-core CPU, 16-core GPU, 1TB SSD, and 32GB unified memory. No regrets whatsoever with regards to the upgrades that I've paid for. It is very expensive in my opinion, but it does exactly what I need it to do. I still feel that the upgrade to the 32GB unified memory was worth it, as well as the additional 2 cores of CPU and GPU that I've paid for. And the performance I get with video editing, I really feel that I didn't need the M1 Max chip. I'm not missing anything out. And in fact, on the Final Cut Pro, on the MacBook Pro, it is rendering my videos way faster than what I get on the Premiere Pro running on my 3080 desktop PC. And mind you, that desktop PC cost me more than $4,500 to build. But it's fine. It's for gaming. I can totally live with that. And if one day should I start gaming on the MacBook Pro, I promise to share the gaming performance with you. Now do take a minute to subscribe to us if you're new to us, and appreciate the way that we're trying to keep videos short, straight to the point. Aside from that, if you have already purchased a 2021 MacBook Pro, I'd really like to hear what are the specs that you've gone for, and specifically what are you using it for, and your thoughts on it. So put them down in the comments below, and that's all I have for you today. So thank you.